Hello, I'm Africa 54 Managing Editor Vincent Makori in for #The What. It's Thursday, August the 12th. This is Africa 54.
An Amnesty International report accuses Ethiopian forces of systematic rape in Tigray. Zambians vote in a presidential election seen as too close to call. And Rwandan and Mozambican forces expel Islamic extremists from a strategic port.
A new report by human rights group Amnesty International says Ethiopian government forces and Eritrean forces have been systematically raping and abusing hundreds of women and girls during the conflict in the country's northern Tigray region. VOA senior diplomatic correspondent Saine reports.
Women and children are bearing the brunt of the suffering in the ongoing fighting in Ethiopia's northern Tigray region. As part of a new report, Amnesty International spoke to 63 survivors of rape and sexual violence from Tigray, in addition to health professionals working with the survivors. Among these survivors, 38 of them said the rapes were perpetrated by Eritrean soldiers. Fiseha Tekle is an Amnesty International researcher for the Horn of Africa.
The victims were detained for more than 24 hours and in some cases for weeks while they were being raped by the soldiers. And in the process we can see that the soldiers were brutalizing the survivors. They were beating them. They were using demeaning words or ethnic slurs against the victims, which shows that sexual violence was used to dehumanize the Tigrayan women in the ongoing conflict.
A 20-year-old woman told Amnesty she was attacked in her home in November 2020 by armed men who spoke Amharic. She was 4 months pregnant. She told Amnesty, "I don't know if they realized I was pregnant. I don't know if they realized I was a person." Amnesty's Adote Akwe told VOA the report is a small snapshot of what is happening on the ground.
The ages of the women, as young as 10 and as old as 62, the use of racial slurs to basically identify them as Tigrayan women, and also the deliberate multiple incidents of rape by many men, even when the women were pregnant.
Akwe told VOA at the time of publication of the report, the Ethiopian government had not issued a response. But there was a tweet in response from neighboring country Eritrea's Minister of Information, Yemane Meskel. The AI report is transparently unprofessional, and it is evident that the AI makes no effort to get the facts right and cross-check the veracity of the allegations. Asked about the report by VOA, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki had this response.
We are closely engaged with countries in the region, leaders in the region, and certainly horrified by what we've seen as ongoing human rights abuses in Ethiopia.
The State Department has repeatedly called on all parties to the conflict to stop fighting and allow humanitarian and medical relief to get through to millions in Ethiopia who are suffering and facing famine. Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed Ali is urging civilians to join the country's armed forces as the fighting escalates with Tigray People's Liberation Front fighters. Cindy Saine, VOA News.
The polls are closing soon in Thursday's Zambian presidential election. It looks to be a showdown between President Edgar Lungu and main opposition rival Hakainde Hichilema that appears to be too tight to call and comes amid mounting debt and a flagging economy. Polling opened at 6 a.m. on Thursday with long lines seen at polling stations in the capital, Lusaka. President Lungu was among the earliest voters, having moved up his voting time. At a voting station in Kabwata suburb on the outskirts of Lusaka, voters say they are hoping for change and the leaders will deliver on their campaign promises.
The change that I want is the leader that I'm going to vote for to deliver the promises that they've assured us during their campaigns.
Why I have decided to vote is that the economy is not okay. As you are saying, we are suffering.
Well, the Zambian Electoral Agency says it expects to declare a winner within 72 hours after the polls close. Now, for more insight on Thursday's presidential election in Zambia, VOA correspondent Peter Clote is standing by on the phone. Peter, tell us what you have seen and heard regarding today's voting and the very tight race between President Edgar Lungu and the main opposition rival Hakainde Hichilema.
Thank you very much. As Vincent, I spoke with some of the foreign poll observers at the polling stations that I visited today. The Commonwealth Poll Observer Mission was led by former Tanzania President Jakaya Kikwete. I asked him what his overview is, and he told me that everything seemed to have moved smoothly and peacefully. I also interacted with the African Union poll observer lead, in this case former Sierra Leonean President Enes Koroma, who also said that he interacted with the polling agents as well as polling officials, and he asked them specifically if they had any problems with the process of the election. They all, as I quote, resoundingly said they had no problem and that everything that they wanted to happen happened transparently and everything went on smoothly. There were heavy lines, in some cases, going round the block, and people queued from 1 a.m., 2 a.m. Some slept at the polling station just to have an opportunity to choose their leader.
Yeah.
So it remains to be seen who will come up tops.
Well, yeah, now you mentioned that the turnout, it looks like the turnout was really big. There were concerns earlier about possibility of violence to the extent that the government actually sent a heavy contingent of soldiers to some regions. Was there any violence witnessed today? Were there any skirmishes at all?
There were none that I saw. However, there were a few sharp disagreements in two of the polling stations that I visited, but those were quickly resolved by polling officials as well as the police present. And in some cases, the police acted swiftly because people were there from the crack of dawn, even at 1 a.m. They separated the men from the women. So the women were queuing in one line, the men were also queuing in one line, and then when they get into the polling station, they told them if you are number A, B, C, D, depending on your name, they pointed you to where you could go and form another queue. That moved the process a little bit quicker. So things were pretty much smooth. There were no violence incidents that I witnessed personally in Lusaka, in the polling stations. I haven't heard any reports about some really bad clashes like it happened 2 weeks ago.
That's good. Peter, tell us a little bit about the tallying process, the transmission of the results, and what we can expect in the next 72 hours, as the polling agency or electoral body said in the country.
Officials of the Electoral Commission tell me that official polling have stopped or ended or concluded, if you may, at 6 p.m. But those who are in line before the 6 p.m. deadline will be allowed to vote. So I spoke with Patricia Luhanga a few minutes ago before the start of the show, and she told me that they are waiting for the first round of updates from the field so they can update the nation. But before the weekend is over, she tells me they would have a fair idea, or Zambians will have a fair idea of who their next leader should be.
Great. Peter, thank you very much. That was VOA correspondent Peter Clote reporting on Zambia's presidential election from Lusaka. Now to East Africa, the African Union's peacekeeping mission in Somalia says it had started investigating reports that civilians were killed during a gunfight between its troops and al Shabaab fighters. The incident occurred on Tuesday following an ambush while its soldiers were on patrol along the Beldamin-Golweyn Forward Operating Base in the Lower Shabelle region. There was a heavy exchange of gunfire between AMISOM forces and al Shabaab terrorists before the patrol team seized firearms, rounds of ammunition and mobile phones, according to a statement released late Wednesday. A farmer told Reuters Thursday that 7 civilians were killed in that fighting. Well, a small amount of Mozambican families have started to return to their homes and villages after a joint force of Mozambican and Rwandan troops regained control of a strategic port from Islamic extremists. The joint Mozambican and Rwandan forces is visibly in control of Masimboa-Dabraia, patrolling public and private buildings, the port, the airport, the hospital, markets and restaurants. The retaking of Masimboa-Dabraia is a notable success for the Rwandan force that deployed to Mozambique last month. Rwandan troops have rapidly helped Mozambique's armed forces achieve victories against the insurgents, who have created a humanitarian emergency in northern Cabo Delgado province and its surrounding areas.
When
the conflict began, we faced a lot of difficulties. They first started using machetes to slash people on sight. We as citizens then decided to ask for guns for self-defense. However, we were not successful. The conflict continued and the militants now had guns. This worsened the conflict. The army then came in and the militants were being killed, as well as the citizens.
Well, before the Rwandan forces arrived, Mozambique's military and police had failed in stemming the insurgents' offensives. More than 3,000 Mozambicans have been killed and 8,000 people displaced by the 4-year insurgency. Nearly 1 million people need urgent food aid as a result of the conflict, according to the United Nations World Food Programme. The Tanzanian government has suspended a local newspaper for running what it called a false story, saying that President Samia Suluhu Hassan would not run for office in 2025. It's the first newspaper suspension in Hassan's tenure. The suspended newspaper, Uhuru, is owned by the country's ruling party, Chama cha Mapinduzi, which has in effect been in power since 1961. The ban came after Uhuru on Wednesday published a front-page story quoting Hassan as saying, "I don't have intentions to contest for presidency in 2025. The ruling CCM party says Uhuru's board has suspended 3 top officials managing the newspaper, including the CEO, over the story. Their suspension is expected to last for 14 days. Now, Hawaiians are turning to traditional practices for insights on coping with climate change. As VOA's Michael Sullivan reports from Honolulu, they are seeking inspiration from the past to achieve a sustainability in the future.
Rising ocean waters are causing erosion, threatening coastal Hawaiian homes. Oahu, the state's principal island, could lose 40% of its beaches from erosion by 2050, says one study, harming tourism, the largest source of income for the islands. Another problem, higher temperatures are causing erratic precipitation and, in places, drought.
Some rainfall is on average going up over time, some is going down. In Hawaii, we've actually seen drying out.
With less stable weather, the islands are seeing more severe storms and flooding, as in Maui in March. There are other impacts, too.
Groundwater wells near the coast, agriculture, infrastructure.
A modern urban center, Honolulu has paved over waterways to control flooding, blocking natural watersheds that once linked the mountains, wetlands, and coast in a single ecosystem. Native Hawaiians called it ahupua'a.
And we're standing in front of an ahupua'a. And the ahupua'a was the Native Hawaiian system of managing resources from ridge to reef.
Hawaii now imports most of its food, but there are efforts to renew traditional farming and conservation methods, including here on the eastern or windward shore of Oahu. Nick Rapoon works for a nonprofit group that grows traditional staple foods like taro and is restoring this lowland area to its natural state. Other groups are restoring the mountain watershed and an aquaculture pond where native Hawaiians once raised fish.
We're just trying to do what we know has been done and what we know worked before. We're not reinventing the wheel with these systems. We're just trying to, I guess, revive them.
Alapaki Luke, who teaches Hawaiian language and culture, says taro patches trap silt and control erosion, something native Hawaiians understood. That traditional wisdom is important, he says.
I'm not about going back 400 or 500 years ago, but we can use the foundation, which you call a kahua, of the Ike, the native tradition, in a modern setting.
Luke says the traditional practices that once supported a population of hundreds of thousands on these islands still have much to teach us. Mike O'Sullivan, VOA News, Honolulu.
We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54. Join the discussion on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also, check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Still to come, the coronavirus pandemic causes some tour guides to plan virtual getaways. We'll have a report. Stay with us. The governor of the U.S. state of Maryland, Larry Hogan, recently announced that 20 teenagers who get vaccinated against the coronavirus will be eligible to receive a full ride to an in-state public university. VOA's Maxim Moskalov has the story.
The state of Maryland's $1 million scholarship lottery called VaxU aims to encourage young people to get their COVID-19 vaccines. The promotion offers vaccinated residents ages 12 to 17 a chance to win one of 20 scholarship prizes to pay for tuition and fees at a public four-year college or university. Similar lotteries are being organized in New York, Ohio, Michigan, Colorado, and other states. In Louisiana alone, more than 750,000 people have registered for the scholarship lottery in that state.
So the first thing is, what we're doing is we're going to be giving away $2.3 million total, $2.3 million total. And the way it's going to work is for 4 weeks, we're going to give $100,000 scholarships to those that are 12 to 17 years of age. And obviously that's eligibility for Pfizer. And then for 4 weeks, we're going to give away $100,000 lottery to those people who are over the age of 18.
The vaccination rate has slowed dramatically in the US. At one point, about 1.3 million vaccines were being administered each day in America. Now that figure barely reaches 300,000 due to a range of reasons, including a lack of trust in its safety and interest. That's why universities like Western Michigan are also promoting COVID vaccinations.
So we're offering incentive scholarships, a total of 60 different scholarships between $500 and $10,000. The scholarships are just for our students.
Officials say the program's success sends a signal.
For things like, lotteries for whether it's for $1 million or for a scholarship, or, you know, a Krispy Kreme donut or a free beer. You know, the fact that these kinds of things can tip the scale for someone just means that they don't have strong objections to vaccines.
Meanwhile, other officials are banning vaccination requirements in state schools, including in Alabama, Arkansas, Florida, and Indiana. Some have also banned mandatory face masks. Health experts say that can counter U.S. efforts to fight the pandemic.
I think there is a role for more aggressive public health measures. And obviously this is a long-standing, you know, kind of tension between individual liberties and the good of the public and public health. You know, the unfortunate thing is, as many people have said, you know, COVID-19 and COVID-19 vaccines, you know, have become so hyper-politicized.
Some state officials are hoping offering up some prizes will be enough to get past anyone's political inclination when it comes to getting a vaccine. Maxim Moskalko for VOA News, Washington.
Well, China's wolf warrior diplomacy represents China as an aggressive rising superpower. The name is inspired by the Chinese blockbuster Wolf Warrior film franchise, whose first film debuted in 2015. VOA's Penelope Pulu spoke with experts on film and Chinese diplomacy about the franchise, its Hollywood influence, and its phenomenal appeal with Chinese audiences.
To make more of an impact on the world, who are less inclined to compromise.
Wolf Warrior 2 was released in 2017 and took China by storm, earning nearly $900 million at the box office, with more than 99% of its revenue generated in the Chinese domestic market. Michael Berry, a professor at the University of California, Los Angeles, says these films are based on Chinese melody films, state-sponsored films invoking nationalist pride.
They're often released to correspond with various national holidays like National Day, and they resonate with various patriotic themes.
One of them is The Founding of a Republic, which was produced in 2009 to mark the 60th anniversary of the People's Republic of China. The Wolf Warrior film franchise is also modeled after 1980s American patriotic action film franchises such as Rambo and Rocky, where the hero, played by Sylvester Stallone, fights against foreign villains in the name of American democracy and justice. In Wolf Warrior 2, the Chinese hero defends stranded Chinese civilians and defenseless Africans in an unnamed African country.
It's also got a colonialist attitude to non-white peoples. And we're just seeing the white savior of American action films being replaced by the Chinese savior in Chinese films.
The Wolf Warrior films boast cutting-edge special effects and feature Hollywood actors such as Frank Grillo, who plays Big Daddy, the American villain, in Wolf Warrior 2.
He played Crossbones in the Captain America films, and so he's a direct bridge between those two worlds. But it wasn't just Frank Grillo. Also the action choreographer, I believe his name is Sam Hargrave. He was also the action choreographer for Captain America Civil War and a lot of these big Marvel films.
Despite this artistic and technological cross-pollination, the two film industries compete against each other, not only in terms of their message, but also in terms of box office revenue. Wolf Warrior 2 surpassed Avengers Endgame at the Chinese box office.
It was able to do the same kind of business that an Avengers movie does in one market, and that's the China market, especially with the anti-American sentiment that's been rising since, since the period that Donald Trump was president. A lot of Chinese audiences have also cooled off about Hollywood.
Berry says China's effective handling of COVID-19 has allowed for the Chinese film industry to recuperate faster than Hollywood. He says it has also contributed to the surge of Chinese patriotism.
I think what we're seeing with this Wolf Warrior diplomacy are various diplomats and public figures from the Chinese public sphere or political sphere standing up and saying, we're not going to take this anymore. Enough of the humiliation. China is not your lapdog. We are not going to stand for it.
Berry adds that China's funding of Chinese blockbusters could sideline Hollywood experts in the Chinese market. Penelope Pulu, VOA News, Washington.
When the coronavirus pandemic paused the global travel in 2020, some tour guides moved online to lead live stream tours of popular destinations. Matt Dibble looks at how virtual getaways may be here to stay.
This youth leadership program in North Carolina usually takes a trip each year to celebrate its graduating seniors. But during the pandemic, there was no leaving home.
So I said, well, how can we do something so that they are at least being given the experience of traveling?
Ivana Ross, director of the program, landed on the idea of a virtual tour with an Israeli company called Hapator. The students chose Australia for their destination.
Come and join me as we learn all about Australia's plants and animals.
The tour was live streamed and interactive.
He was very engaged with us. He made it fun. He was funny. I saw different mountain structures, different types of birds. It looked like a whole new world, you know.
Dominic DeRozzi has been a professional tour guide in San Francisco for over 30 years. But in 2020,
my normal work schedule just collapsed.
With a few pieces of equipment and software from Hapator, he was ready for live streaming.
You are on the main drag of Chinatown. Hi, Lily.
During the tour, participants can ask questions.
The fortune cookie, as we know it, was invented right here in San Francisco.
Even as travel to the city is picking up, DeRozzi thinks virtual tours, which start at about $14, are here to stay.
It comes at a good value to give people, you know, a 1 hour slice of a city or a destination.
We never try to replace real tourism. We're trying to create an additional exposure to new places, maybe a niche destination.
Almost like being there, minus the smells and the tastes. Matt Dibble for VOA News, San Francisco.
Well, and that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us in Washington, thank you